task as an investor, and I'm only speaking for myself, is to be super active when it's needed, but also to make a step back and have the patience for things to evolve. Yeah? And in my opinion, there's few things worse to have activity when it's not needed. So being overly active towards the founder when the next milestone is a bit ahead and when they have to put in the work first to reach it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And as you say, with companies at different stages, that way it also levels out the overall workload you have to put into the portfolio.
I'm Pedro Coelho, your host, and this is The End Talks. In this episode, the power of patience for long-term value, with my guest, Markus Feuerecker. First, Markus, thank you for coming, obviously. It's a pleasure to have you at the end.
It's a pleasure for me.
I'd like to start with asking not only who is Markus, but also what brought Markus to where you are today in your career.
Oh, well, so quick intro. I'm a professional investor, you could say. Background in PE, slipped into healthcare, developed a passion for health tech, and built a firm around it with a partner, where we are now in the very fortunate position to back great European founders and have done so 22 times so far.
Nice. Who is the man behind the professional investor? I know you have kids that you are very dear for, sports nowadays as well, more and more. So who is the person behind, I guess, the professional that shows up every day to work?
I would say curious person, and a person that tries to get several things right in life. Probably that's true for any investor. You have to have the curiosity that drives you to put out the hard work, not only in the beginning but also when you support companies. But also you have not only one company you're responsible for, but several. So you have to be able to do that, and I think that's also true in life, at least for myself. So I enjoy many things, and I only do stuff that I really like, that I'm passionate about, which is true for family, which is true for different activities like sports nowadays, as you say.
Very cool. I like to say that investors have probably, or need to have, the mix between being professional due diligencers, which means being very analytical, being very objective around what is the story, but what are the numbers behind this company. So, what's the TAM, what is the realistic SAM, and how do we achieve this, and what's the actual value opportunity. But then also have to be very emotional extrovert people that are able to connect with founders, to be able to also have this human buy-in from each other. So reflecting on your career, I guess, especially with the PE background, was probably perhaps more analytical at that point versus what you have today. How does that balance on your daily basis? How would you position yourself in this balance? And where do you think your strengths and weaknesses are on those?
And for me personally, I was never the really outgoing person in my past. So that's something sort of you then have to work on and to work for. Certainly, you have to be super analytical as an investor, empathy is super important in my opinion. So you meet so many different founders, and I guess having worked in PE, where you see sort of the end stage, and it's a nice reference to the conference here, the end stage of building a successful company and somebody who then entrusts you with the company he built. There are different types, and different ways that lead to success. And this is something I apply now in the early stage work, because I'm aware that there is not this one type of founder that can bring us together to success. So I'm personally trying to be super open and try to listen and try to evaluate individual strength and not apply a cookie cutter principle here. And so that's what I'm using in my work.
It's funny you say that, because obviously one thing I always reflect as a founder is how no founder is the same, but also no business is the same. So I guess when you are sitting at the board and you have a portfolio of companies, right? they are all going through different stages. So at any point in day and time, they might need you more or less, depending on what's happening in the company. But also depending on the founder. Obviously, I would say first-time founders traditionally struggle with some things that probably founders that have done it before don't, and vice versa. So there's different worries that you probably have as an investor in different types of founders in different stages. So how do you manage that, number one, and how do you manage your time to ensure you're always around when it's needed? Because I think that's also, at the end of the day, the job of the investor after you invest, right?
I think the first thing is you have to be approachable, accessible, for people in your organization. I mean, we are still a small firm, 100 million fund, small and lean team, and the lean team is on purpose. So because that way you remain close to the companies you invest in. Then you need to learn basically that task as an investor, and I'm only speaking for myself, is to be super active when it's needed, but also to make a step back and have the patience for things to evolve. And in my opinion, there's few things. First, to have activity when it's not needed. So being overly active towards the founder when the next milestone is a bit ahead and when they have to put in the work first to reach it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And as you say, with companies at different stages, that way it also levels out the overall workload you have to put into the portfolio.
I was going to do a tricky question and ask you what is your favorite type of founder, but I don't want to put you on the spot. You have a portfolio of founders that I don't want to upset.
No, the type of founder, I can answer that, the passionate founder that grabs the goals that are so high that he's perceived as a bit lunatic by others. That's the profile.
What I call the oblivious founder, right? But naively oblivious, right? Because he doesn't know he's oblivious, but
naivety is something, and that's also true for us. I mean, in the end, we are founders as well, having set up the firm here. So you need to have a degree of naivety in order to overcome the very good rational points that might hold you back from doing such a risky thing as setting up a company.
By the way, I actually said this on the panel yesterday, how someone was asking me, because I explained that when we raised the round with you guys, I had done 232 pitches to different investors, right? And we received, 12 term sheets, and we had 3 that we actually genuinely wanted to have that said no at the end. So 15 of these we really wanted at the end, and we received 12 term sheets. And at that point in time, I said, actually, if you look back and you'd have asked me, if a guy pitches 150 times and has 150 no's, he's crazy, completely oblivious that he doesn't understand there's something wrong. Obviously, eventually it worked out, and I think very happily, and probably the ratio isn't that bad if you compare it to many other rounds out there. But regardless, I think there's a thin line between what is high conviction and obliviousness, right? And that happens also probably for you guys too, right? When you see a founder and you're like, wow, this is great. But actually, when you came across us, we already had some term sheets on the table. So perhaps it wasn't oblivious anymore, but it could have been, right? If you met us earlier in that phase. So for you as an investor, how do you differentiate this thin line between craziness, obliviousness of a founder versus this high conviction that you can believe in? Yeah, because it is a thin line. It's a very tenuous line.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, for us, we're the ones who try to build the convictions based on what we are doing and what we are learning. So we try to blend out any other term sheets that are around, etc. So that's why I think that's also the reason why we have been super active in a time when the market was completely holding back, and that's also the reason why we are confident to back founders where we know that a large part of the market spoke already with. And then fine line. We have the luxury to not only have to back one company, several. It's part of our game to be wrong, but we want to be wrong for the right reasons. So what we don't want to do is having troubles for things that we did not anticipate as potential issues. So, and that helps you with making the decision. So you make yourself aware of all of the set of opportunities and risks and challenges and also mitigations that you could put to play, and then you make a choice.
Interesting. There is a phrase that has been credited to Vinod Khosla, quite famous now, which is how a huge percentage, I think the phrase is 90+% of VCs add negative value, and then small percentage add neutral value, and then only like 1 or 2% add positive value in their investments. So how do you perceive this going from obviously PE to your first VC, and how do you try to add value? I think you alluded to earlier a little bit, but let's really focus on this idea of value add. I know that the way you position it, and actually we were talking about this offline earlier, how you position it to really try to be in a place where you can add value to the company and to the founders. So how do you position this as Markus, but also as Wiser? Because obviously they go hand in hand here.
Adding value is for us something that goes beyond the easy things. So we like to do heavy lifting stuff, and that can be things that are not work intensive on our side. So just being the part who in the board when there are difficult decisions, when you need to have an aggressive decision on growth, to support it in a very like rational, calm way, and focusing on really the decision and blending out the noise around it. So this is one thing that you get from experienced investors, different types of experiences. That's something we like to use. The other part is being the specialist fund, being a team that's super complementary. We can add and tap into this. It's opening doors that are really hard to open. And that's the part I'm stressing, the really hard to open ones. But also this blend of backgrounds and experiences when it comes to your strategy that you want to define as a company. And on top of that, basically the classic VC toolbox. But for us, and for me personally, you asked the question, it's very important to stand for those rather hard to get elements.
I mean, I know one, but I don't want to make you say that story. So if you have to look back, and it's not been that many years yet as a VC, so let's forget the PE journey for a second. What was the toughest, worst, whichever name you want to call it, story that you've been through that you can share, if you can share any? I'd love to hear some challenges you've came across that perhaps shaped you differently today as a VC.
One where I don't have a spontaneous answer, probably because the road has been so short so far. So nothing out of the ordinary yet. It's your daily challenges that probably sometimes the deal you wanted to do, and for whatever reason, for your own mistakes, you lost it. And probably that's something I want to point out. For us, there are many things that can go wrong. But if it's things that we could have done better in winning a company, doing a deal, seeing a deal in the market, that's something where I spent weeks after thinking about what could we have done differently, as well as on the route of a portfolio company. Maybe a funnel was not converted as good as it could have been done. Then we ask ourselves, what could we have done differently, etc. That's two examples, nothing out of the ordinary, but that's something where we try to make things better.
Cool examples nonetheless. It's actually, there is a topic that I think somehow we cracked it at Biorce, but also many companies struggle with, which is this idea that the relationship between VC and startups is a two-way street. Obviously VC has capital to allocate, startups need that capital, but it's not just the VC needs to be falling in love with this company to allocate the capital, right? The startup has, at the end of the day, the last word, right? And actually, I remember in our journey, you've done amazingly to go from our first meeting to term sheet in 7 days, which for me was, by the way, just proof of that high conviction that you were able to build in those 7 days, and then being able to take action straight away, not sitting around and messing around, which is a big thing that a lot of VCs obviously don't get to do because they take a much longer process, perhaps more unflexible ICs and so forth. So in your perspective, how do you ensure when you get to meet a founder for the first time or a startup for the first time, that you also realize that indeed it is a two-way street? So not only I need to build conviction, but I also need to build the founder conviction that I'm the right guy to give him the money. Right?
So the one thing is to come prepared. So as a specialist, we can afford, on the one hand side, to know the overall market, to know when a company stands out, that triggers our curiosity. We had that in the beginning. But we also run theses, investment theses across sub-segments. In your case, we had a pharma tech thesis running, which made us in general curious. And this obviously helps you also to transport to the founder that you're capable of being the right sparring partner. Yeah? That's what we always want to be, the right sparring partner. And we don't want to waste time from us and the founders. So we are also very honest. Yeah, if something won't work out, we don't do any research projects. We drop it. That's why we can focus more on those cases that really trigger us and put the effort in. And then we have this natural advantage of being a sort of founder-led first-generation fund, so to speak, with everything positive that comes with it, which is a very short route to the SC, where a large part sits in front of you. And that way we can also ensure that we can fast-track things that we really want to do. And we also believe in quick decisions. Yeah. So based on the experience we have, we know that a deal doesn't get better in most cases if you have sort of the data together just by waiting out. Yeah. We want that we lead cases where the founder can go back to work very quickly. And if you look back at the past year, and I'm asking the question back to you, how much did that help you? This quick process in going back to build the product, etc., the market. What was the impact on you?
It was a great impact, obviously. And I think we went from closing a round and having some good commercial traction, as you know. And I can openly say this, that we had some commitments that then didn't turn out to be real. Well, that materializing is the term, I guess. Real they were, but they didn't materialize into sales. And I guess you, as you alluded to earlier, had this patience to be able to say, fine, that's fine. Keep doing what you're doing, because eventually it will. And then it did. And obviously then it did very fast, and it scaled super fast. And we are in this route from 7 to 8 digits revenue still this year, which I think even for us last year when we prepared the budget, it wasn't what we were preparing for. So I think it's been great to see this scale, but also great to have a partner on the other side that, regardless of the uncontrollable variables that we live in, and that even I couldn't control, that you are able to sit back and say, no worry, it's okay, these things happen, let's keep operating, and eventually it will turn out. Because obviously anyone else in your shoes have said, no, ownership, where is this? We need to do this, right? And while there was a right to do that, you chose to take the other, perhaps controversial stance of saying, no, it's fine. These things happen. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll get there. And then we did. And I think now it's a beautiful story to tell. But at that time, it certainly wasn't. And using Alex Ferguson's phrase, it was squeaky bum time for me. And I wasn't sure how many months left. Because you never know. It looks like it's right there. And it's a little bit like you're getting to the water when you're swimming. And I know you're swimming nowadays. And it looks right there. And you keep doing some strokes. And it somehow looks like it's not moving. Until eventually, obviously, you're by the shore and it's fine. So again, thank you for all the support so far, and I hope for a long time to go. But it was indeed a very good journey on that topic. I had one more question to you. Obviously, if you look around the VC job, right? Once you raise your fund, then you have to deploy your capital. You probably have a timeline that you want to deploy this capital from. Then you have to keep in touch with this capital to ensure that it returns your expectations. Traditional journey is that you then raise a new fund, right? And I maybe can preempt that you will eventually start raising your new fund, I guess, not having any inside knowledge here. How do you think it will change not only your time and availability to support the portfolio, but also balancing act between raising a new fund and eventually deploying a new fund versus managing your old fund? Well, still new now, but I guess at that point in time, old fund and the portfolio companies. And how do you think that can impact your relationship and your involvement? Has obviously this multiplier effect keeps growing after years?
That's a very good question. I mean, like you're a founder, I'm a founder, and my partner in the business is a founder. So that's also how we like to think about our company, YZL Capital. And feedback from founders like you and the evidence from the portfolio tells us we should put more resources behind that strategy. And that's what we are doing. So obviously we are growing, raising a new fund, and basically ramping up our work for European health tech ecosystem. But we have a team. We built up a team that's fantastic. That does a tremendous job. We are super selective in picking this team. So far, we made great choices, and that's something we're gonna continue. Obviously, ramping up our resources, our team, and to continue to work as a healthcare allocator in the European market, and that's great joy for us, and something we are really hungry to do more of the same.
And shout out to the Wiser team, because you do have a great team. So I'll definitely shout that out for you. One last question, Markus, before we wrap up. What makes you wake up every day to do this job? What is the factor that makes you realize that every morning, whenever the alarm clock rings or doesn't even ring, that you get excited, get out of bed and get moving?
I would say it's, on the one hand side, it's curiosity about any new founder that might be introduced that day to me, any sort of potential lead in the pipeline of a certain company, where we try to tackle it together and try to win that one. On the other hand side, I have the chance to leave really big footsteps in the health tech market with the work we're doing. Obviously, we are doing only the light lifting, the founders do the heavy lifting, but that's something extremely motivating, and I have a feeling it's gonna continue.
Awesome. Markus, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure.